Hello and welcome to the Stew with JT Brew on the Dynasty Pros Football Channel. I'm your host, Justin Taylor. Today in the Stew, we're discussing the Philadelphia Eagles, their draft, fantasy players, upcoming schedule for the 2023 season. I'm here with Hutchinson Brown. Stick around with us. You're in the Stew.
You up on trades and why you move, you ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points, makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release, we started with the mock draft and now we making a mockery of the leaderboard. Quite obviously not a scrub, so start an institute, make evaluations like a commissioner do. It's to the point your wife make you watch in a different room. Update your roster and pick and choose when you get some news. Not much that we enjoy more than sifting through new statistics to make it to our end zones through different routes. Universities, institutes, down to homies who click in groups. I introduce you to the Stew with JT Brew.
Hello and welcome to the Stew. I'm JT. You can find me on Twitter at JT Orange. You can also follow the show at JT Brew Stew. We are excited to have Hutchinson Brown on the channel with us today, talking Eagles, his favorite team. You can find him on the Football Guys, content creator for DLF, and also a new podcast coming up called Hooked on Fantasy. Tell me a little bit about all the stuff you do there, Hutch.
Yeah, I'm always on Twitter is my main social media. I'm at HutchinsonB_FF on Twitter. And yeah, I'm going to start appearing on the Football Guys YouTube channel. I write for DLF, and me and Luke Sawhook. JT, do you know Luke? I'm sure you know him.
I don't know him personally, but I follow him on all his stuff. I know I'm familiar with all his things that he does.
Yeah. Luke's incredible. But me and him, a couple weeks ago, we started a podcast called Hooked on Fantasy. It's something he's tried to do solo for a few times. It just hasn't worked out. And he decided he wanted to team up with me. And we started co-hosting it. It's gone really well so far. So if you check out Hooked on Fantasy, it's pretty much anywhere you get your podcast. And we live stream it every Monday night. And then we're going to post it as a podcast on Tuesday morning. So in our most recent episode was with Ray GQ. And we just talked all about the DeAndre Hopkins news and all the consequences, all the breakdowns there for fantasy football.
Yeah, that's awesome. For this episode, we're continue our series, going in a deep dive of every NFL team. Today, we're talking about the Eagles. Kind of give me an idea how did you become an Eagles fan? Who are your favorite players, either current or all time? Just tell me a little bit about why you love the Eagles.
So, I grew up surrounded by a family of football. I mean, my intermediate family is not really any football fans in it. It's funny, my dad actually has gotten really into fantasy football and stuff because of me, because of how much I do it. He's actually into football now because of me, it's usually the other way around. But yeah, my intermediate family is never really into football very much. But my mom's side of the family, my grandfather, may your rest in peace, and my cousins, and they were all big Eagles fans. And they introduced me, and I started watching with them and cheering along with the Eagles with them. And it started in I think the first time I really started watching the Eagles was in 2016, which was Carson Wentz's rookie year. He did not have a great rookie year, but I really started to fall in love with the Eagles that year. And then in 2017, Carson Wentz, we all know, had his MVP level season. And that's what really made me fall in love with just football. Watching him dominate at that level, obviously, he's one of the laughing stocks in the NFL the past couple of years, but watching him in that season was just, this dude was everything. He was it. He was the next big thing. He was up there as one of the best quarterbacks in the league at that point. And he was, in dynasty fantasy football, he was competing for a top 3 spot in a super flex league. This dude was everything. He really, really was. And I just loved watching him that season. Sometimes I still go back and watch highlights of Carson Wentz from that year. He just dominated at a different level that season. He's definitely that season. Watching that season, definitely one of my favorite Eagles players I've ever seen. I really, really love watching that season. It was truly, truly difference making.
Well, I'm jealous as a Colts fan. As people know, if you don't know, I've been a Colts season ticket holder for about 15 years. So I'm jealous that you got to see the prime Carson Wentz, because when they made the trade for him, I was actually pretty excited as a Colts fan. I thought, all right, this guy's going to come in. He knows Frank Reich, knows the system. He, had some down times at the end there with the Eagles, but I thought it was going to be a fresh start, man. I thought he was going to be the answer for the Colts. I was so pumped about it. And when it didn't work out, man, I was just crushed. I was why? And I always talk about it with people because he gets more hate than he probably deserves. He's one of those guys that he actually put up pretty good stats. He was a pretty solid quarterback all around. Biggest issue for him is he always seemed to get the worst turnovers at the worst times, especially on the Colts, that just ended up being back-breaking plays that just kind of defined his whole role for the Colts, which I felt was terrible for because watching the games, he actually was pretty good quarterback most of the time he played for them, and it just soured, everything soured on him, and I just felt bad for him, and I thought, okay, he's going to get another shot in Washington. I hope he does well there, and then things kind of fell apart there with him with the injuries and everything. So he's a guy I did not see that career path for him early on. I just thought he was going to be a really good quarterback. I didn't know he was going to be a Hall of Famer, but man, that year he was on an MVP pace. I just thought this guy's going to be really, really good. And then it's all the little things just went against him. And it just kind of feels like he just had bad juju after that.
Yeah. I mean, the main problem with Carson Wentz was never really his physical talent. He always had it. I mean, some injuries did obviously held him back a little bit, but it was really all mental. I mean, this dude was reportedly in the Colts room and the Commander's room a locker room cancer. I mean, he was not a good presence for anybody in the last 3 teams he was on. He just wasn't a good presence. Apparently, he was just a really, really bad teammate, a really negative person in the locker room, and that's just not somebody you want to have. So I think that's one of the bigger reasons he actually moved around from team to team and actually did not have the NFL career we hoped for him. I think it's a lot mental, less physical. But yeah, Carson Wentz, the career after that Nick Foles Super Bowl, it was kind of never the same.
They did get the Super Bowl win, though, so you got to love that. Obviously, Nick Foles getting the win, that was pretty huge there. But now you got the Eagles. They're right back in it. Made it the Super Bowl last year. Let's get in here real quick. Let's going to talk about the draft. Let's start off kind of seeing what they did here. 2023 draft. The Eagles, for all their faults they've had over the years, they've drafted phenomenally here of late. Let's pull up some of the guys they've had going down the list. Made a couple moves, traded up to number 9, got Jalen Carter out of Georgia, the defensive tackle. A lot of people said, hey, we think Jalen Carter is the number 1 player in the league. There was talks about him being the first overall pick for a while to the Chicago Bears. So getting him at 9 was pretty amazing. And then they came back and later in the first round, the 30th overall pick, got Nolan Smith, another player out of Georgia, an edge. Nolan Smith, one of the top, if not the top player coming out of high school, a guy that I think has just barely scratched the surface. And then later on, they just kept adding that defense. Sidney Brown, one of my favorite players out of Illinois, just an absolute stud in the 3rd round. And then they also grabbed Kylie Ringo, another Georgia guy, as they just lived with Georgia, got him in the 4th round, a guy that people talked about, maybe 1st round, 2nd round potential, and then dropped all the way to the 4th. What do you think as an Eagles fan watching this draft and just kind of seeing all these good players fall right in the Eagles' laps?
I mean, it was really, really nice to see. I mean, Jalen Carter, obviously, he was being talked about as potentially the 1st overall pick for a while, but then the off the football field issues came along and it gave us some concern. So it'll be interesting to see how that bleeds into his NFL career. But I think at 9th overall, I'm very, very happy with that pick. Jalen Carter was probably the best player available there. And Nolan Smith, while he is very raw as a prospect, he is one of the better athletes we've seen coming out of college in a bit. Like, he really is an elite athlete. And I love what the Eagles are doing. They're just drafting so many athletes. I mean, Jalen Carter is an elite athlete. You talk about Jordan Davis, his 40 time for his size. I mean, I believe he ran like 4.6-ish 40 at like 300 something. Like, his 40 time was unbelievable. He's so fast for his size. And then you draft Nolan Smith, an amazing athlete. And then I love the round 4 pick with Keely Ringo, cornerback for Georgia. I mean, he is also a raw prospect, but I mean, this dude is like 6'2", 215, can run like 4.3 level speed. He's just absolutely insane as an athlete. This Eagles offense is getting a lot more explosive, a lot more dangerous, and I'm really, really excited to see it.
Yeah, I just thought they just did a fantastic job getting those guys on defense, just getting high talent, just talented players all around. Yeah. Ringo's a guy, I think, if he went to another team and he had to be the number 1 cornerback, you might be a little more nervous. But the fact that he's going to a team already loaded with two of the best cornerbacks in the league. He's going to get a chance to sit and learn, maybe play some of that nickel slot. I think it's just a perfect spot for him. And then a guy I've just been talking up all offseason, especially anybody who plays IDP. I'm like, go out in your rookie drafts, get this guy. Sidney Brown, absolute stud out of Illinois. He just was everywhere. They had probably the best secondary in all of college football last year with Devin Witherspoon, who went number 5 overall to the Seahawks. And then they had Devonta Martin, who went in the second round to the Washington Commanders. So 3 of their 4 starters in the secondary went in the top 3 rounds. He's a little bit older player, but man, I expect him to win one of those starting safety spots. And I just think he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. Super athletic. That was the question going in to the combine, was like, hey, kind of, like, is he as athletic as he looks on film? And he crushed the combine, looked great, great 40 time, great agility drills, everything you needed from him. That solidified him. Him going to the 3rd round, I thought was an absolute steal for them, as I thought he was probably, if not the best, the second best safety in the draft. So I thought 3rd round, I was like, that's just amazing. And this is a great spot as he goes in and has a chance to start with their 2 of their starters moving on in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Sidney Brown was a really, really good safety prospect coming out. I liked him a lot, like you did. And 3rd round was really nice to see a 3rd round pick for him.
Yeah, also looking at who else they picked up. 3rd round, right before Sidney Brown, they took Tyler Steen, offensive tackle, Alabama. Just keeps adding guys to that offensive line. There's talks of him in camp, possibly winning one of the guard spots. They say he can play guard or tackle. And then later on, 6th round, a little bit of just an extra pick, throw a guy out there. Took Tanner McKee from quarterback from Stanford. Had some struggles in college, but was a pretty high-end player that a lot of people kind of thought he might go in the 3rd or 4th round, and he dropped to the 6th. So kind of a steal for them there. And then the 7th round, Moro Ojomo, defense end, Texas. That's just another guy they're going to stick there, see if he possibly can make the roster or maybe in the practice squad.
Yeah.
But another year of, it just felt like the Eagles crushing the draft after they got done. Most, analysts, most people are talking about it. They thought either if they weren't the best team in the draft, they were top 3 to 5. And that's kind of how I felt. Is that how you felt coming out as an Eagles fan?
Yeah, they had an excellent draft. I mean, the last 2 years of Eagles drafting has been really, really good. I mean, they've just crushed the drafts. They've done a really, really great job. It's really nice to see for Howie Roseman, who's been a little bit ridiculed for his drafting, especially at the wide receiver position over the past couple years. But he's really made up for it here with the last 2 offseasons. The Eagles have done a great job. Let's
get into kind of our fantasy players that we love on this team. There's a lot to like on offense of this Eagles team. Yeah. They got Jalen Hurts, a guy who a lot of people liked coming in last year. He was kind of on that upswing, and now he's in the conversation. Do you take him, depending on the format, do you take him 1-1 overall? And he's pretty much consistently top 4 in almost any startup draft. What do you think about Jalen Hurts, just the year he had last year, kind of coming out of nowhere, doing what a lot of people thought he might have the ability to do, but I don't think anyone thought it was going to end up like it did last year?
No. I mean, I was a believer in Jalen Hurts. I was someone that was really, really in for him for this season. I was in on Devonta Smith and AJ Brown. I thought this offense was going to take a big step, and it ended up being that way. I don't think I expected anything this massive, but I mean, they were like a top 3 team in scoring last year. They were unbelievable, and Jalen Hurts really took that step as a passer. Now he's like locked in as the franchise quarterback for the Eagles, which is really great to see as a Philly fan. But yeah, I mean, Hurts absolutely deserves to be in the conversation for redraft as the 101 in a Superflex startup. I mean, in a Superflex league, and then in a Dynasty Superflex startup. I mean, I think I'd take Mahomes over him. I think it's fair to take Allen over him. I have Hurts ranked at 2 right now in a Superflex startup. So I think if you want to take him at the 102, that's very fine. 101, I mean, if you really want to go for it, I wouldn't hate you for it. He's really just locked in. He's a great fantasy piece due to the rushing and the passing combo that he brings, and the offense around him, the offensive line he's got. It's just too good. So yeah, Jalen Hurts locked in for the next like 5-ish years as a dominant fantasy football asset.
Yeah, I was looking at FanDuel earlier, just trying to kind of see where some of the numbers and where they were at for Hurts. Currently sitting at plus 1,200 to win MVP. He's one of the top 5 candidates on there, plus 1,200. I don't hate those odds at all for them at that. And a really interesting one, if people are into just random plays, season-long plays, he currently at plus 750 is the favorite to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns. So pretty unbelievable. I mean, I thought that was really interesting when I saw that. I was like, I figured he's going to get, a lot of touchdowns. I figured the over-under was going to be somewhere around 10 or so because he had a lot last year. Yeah, and he is right now the odds-on favorite to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns as a quarterback. So if he ends up leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns, fantasy owners are going to be really, really excited about what he's been able to do. That would just be crazy. That's not money I wouldn't mind throwing a little money on that. We got a comment in here from Dustin, our friend Dustin over there at Dynasty Pros. JT and Hutch, 2 greats in the industry right here. Thank you, Dustin. We appreciate it. Thanks for tuning into the show. Going on here, I think what always makes a quarterback better is having the guys around him. AJ Brown, he keeps moving up people's draft boards. Kind of where do you have him sitting? Kind of his overall ADP in your mind, and where do you have him ranked dynasty-wise for wide receivers right now?
I mean, AJ Brown, I think he deserves to be around, the top 5-ish in dynasty rankings for wide receivers. He absolutely deserves to be in that range. But there is some concerns. I mean, I think next year he's not going to be as highly valued. I think actually if you're looking to potentially sell him, I think this actually might be a great time. Next year he's going to be 27 years old, which is an age that people start to get scared a little bit and call him a veteran. And, the Eagles had a fantastic year last year. They really did. But if somehow they would have a down year, maybe if AJ Brown got injured, or maybe if something went a little bit off for the Eagles after a Super Bowl loss, we see a lot of teams after a Super Bowl loss kind of fall apart a little bit. But if the Eagles were to come out and have a bit of an off year, not something were to go a little bit wrong, AJ Brown would have not a top 5 season. If you were to have wide receiver 7, 8, 9 numbers, and he's 27 years old next year, his value might take a significant dip in dynasty on the market. So honestly, if you get a crazy offer, I would not be opposed to getting rid of AJ Brown. I think this might be the peak of his value.
Yeah, I like where your head's at on that. I agree with you on that analysis for sure. What about the Devonta Smith, a guy, coming into the league, people were a little iffy on him. The size, everybody talked about how small he was. But, I mean, guy just absolutely dominated in college at Alabama. People were a little down on him, and then he was just a monster last year. Everybody seems back up on him. He's one of those guys, kind of hard to read with A.J. Brown on the team as well. Do you kind of see him as a low-end wide receiver 1, kind of high-end wide receiver 2?
Yeah, I think around that range is totally right. And I just want to throw out something because there are a lot of people who doubt Devonta Smith and tell us that the only reason he was so good is because Dallas Goedert was injured. Because in that stretch where Dallas Goedert was injured, he was really, really good. So I just have some splits I want to read off for you guys. So in weeks 1 through 10, Devonta Smith, he wasn't very good for fantasy. This was the first 10 weeks before Dallas Goedert's injury. Weeks 1 through 10, he averaged 6 targets, 4 receptions a game, about 48 yards a game, and 12.2 PPR fantasy points per game. That's a pace that would put him at a lower wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3 kind of finish. And if you draft him where he's going right now and he gives you those numbers, you're not going to be very happy with Devonta Smith on your fantasy team. But then weeks 11 through 15 happened. I mean, Devonta Smith was averaging 8.4 targets a game, 5 receptions a game, 84 yards a game, and about 15.8 PPR fantasy points per game. Those are wide receiver 1 numbers, dominating. And people like to bring up those 2 splits. And it's an intriguing argument, right? Because when Dallas Goedert was gone, Devonta Smith was great, but when he was there, he wasn't great. But people don't like to talk about the last 6 games that Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith played together. Here's what happened, because the Eagles saw how good Devonta Smith was in that stretch. They were mind blown, and they didn't look back. In weeks 16 through 18 and the 3 playoff games, Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert played together. And look at Dallas Goedert's splits as well. He was getting all the snaps. He was involved in the offense. You cannot make the excuse that he was injured. That's just not a realistic excuse you can make. Devonta Smith in these 6 games, 9.1 targets per game, 6.5 catches per game, 82 yards per game, averaging 17.7 fantasy points per game. That would have been enough to be a top 5-ish receiver in fantasy football. I mean, Devonta Smith, the Eagles saw what Devonta Smith could do, and they said, we need to get you a premium target share in our offense because that's what he deserves because he's an elite wide receiver. So Devonta Smith should absolutely be in contention for a top 12 this season, and his ADP at wide receiver 13-14 is perfectly fine with me.
Just talking about these teams with two, stud wide receivers on teams, sometimes people get nervous about the target share. People talk about T. Higgins with Jamar Chase. You got Waddle, Tyreek, you got Devontae and AJ here. But I just think I've seen in these teams, to me, if the guys have enough talent, they can feed two guys. Two guys can feed in and be studs. Yep. I'm not worried about it. If I'm looking at these guys, if I'm coming around in a second round or a third round of a draft and Devonta Smith's there or T. Higgins is there, that type of player, I'm not worried that Chase is there. I'm not worried that AJ's there. I'd almost rather have one of those guys at a lower ADP and then maybe pass on one of the guys that I'm going to have to spend, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 in order to get. What do you think about that?
I think that's totally fair. I mean, when you talk about AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Jamar Chase, those three are all pretty much, those three are usually first round picks. And then you talk about T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Waddle. Most of them are either late second, early third round picks. So you're definitely getting a discount on those players, but you're getting it for a reason. I mean, those three first that I named earlier are the number ones. Like, those three are not getting overtaken by T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith. That is just not happening. Those three are just more talented players. But I love what you said to the point where if you have the talent, you get you get those players involved. When you have a talented player, when you have a stud player, you have to get them a premium role in your offense. It's just a necessity. You see it happen all the time. I expect it to happen with Jordan Addison this year, even though Justin Jefferson's there. I expect it to happen with Treylon Burks, even though Hopkins is there. When you have a talented player, you get them the football. Talent will win out in the end. So when a team sees talent, they're going to get them the football as much as they can, and Devonta Smith is no exception to that.
The real question mark with this Eagles team is everybody's asking, what is going to happen with the running back crew? Miles Sanders off to the Carolina Panthers. They trade for they get Rashad Penny. They trade for DeAndre Swift. I actually like both those guys a ton. I'm a big Rashad Penny guy. I have been since he was at San Diego State, and people thought they overdrafted him in the first round. His numbers when he is healthy are ridiculous. And I just saw a podcast the other day. I'm forgetting his first name, but Singleton, the running back coach for the Eagles, was talking up Penny about how he watched him and really liked him in college. And then Swift, all the things that he can do. A lot of people are worried about the timeshare here. What's going to happen? You also have Kenneth Gainwell in there. You got Scott. It's going to be interesting, but I'm taking either one or both these guys in a lot of leagues, and I'm making trades for them if people are down on them. I just think this team's going to find ways to use these guys. Penny, are we going to get a full season at him? I wouldn't count on it, but can you get 6 to 8 really good games? I think so. And then I think if you do that, I think Swift, if he kind of stays in that role he was at in Detroit, where he's getting your 10 or 15 touches and they're kind of involving a little bit in the passing game, that stuff, I still think he can be valuable. I think their ADP obviously is dipped big time because neither one are the guy, but I still like both of them. What do you think about them? What are you doing with those guys?
I think their backfield is really interesting this year. I mean, you talk about a lot of ambiguity, and usually when you see I just said the word ambiguous. When you see ambiguous backfield, you see a break from one of these guys. That's usually what happens. But for this backfield is a little more interesting to me because of Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a guy that rushes a lot. He steals touchdowns, vultures rush attempts, and when he sees pressure, he doesn't dump off. You didn't see a primary pass catcher for the Eagles last year looking at their running back room, even though Kenneth Gainwell and Miles Sanders are both very serviceable pass catchers. I am worried about DeAndre Swift a lot. Every time we've seen him get a workhorse role in Detroit, it hasn't worked out very well. They've tried to do it multiple times. It just never worked. And then they try to put him in a pass catching role. In the Eagles offense, there's just no room for a pass catching role to me. They just don't dump off to the running back. That's just not something Jalen Hurts does. When he sees pressure, he's going to run. And as a result, I think DeAndre Swift might just, I don't think he's going to get the pass catching role that we think he is. So I'm actually a little bit more worried about DeAndre Swift, especially since ADP is nearing the RB2 range. I just don't want to take that shot. I don't think that price is worth it personally. I'd much rather take it like Darthro and Rashad Penny, who, like you said, when he's on the field, he is extremely talented, extremely productive. This dude has one of the highest yards per carry in his career of all time. Like, this dude is unbelievable when he's healthy and touching the football. So I do like Rashad Penny later for that shot. But DeAndre Swift, I'm a little bit worried about how he fits in this offense. I just don't think the fit is there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm worried that Kenneth Gainwell is similar to DeAndre Swift, and they already like Gainwell. You know, he's getting a little bit PT. I'm worried that they really split up a bunch of those carries. If they do get receptions, which they didn't throw the running backs, like you said, very much at all last year. It's rough, but I'm taking a dart throw on Rashad Penny. And if somebody's willing to trade him for cheap, I'll take him for cheap in a trade. So he's a guy I'm thinking it's worth it. Even if you only get half a season out of him, I think you're going to get half a productive season. So if he could be your RB3 or your RB4 on your team, I think especially in a best ball league where you're going to get those times if he gets carries and has monster games, he's automatically in there. I absolutely love him at his ADP in best ball. So he's a guy that I'm interested there. Let's talk briefly here about their defense. This is just a unit that was just crazy good last year. Pull up the depth chart here real quick. They added Jalen Carter to Jordan Davis, who I think is going to be in the lineup a lot more this year. They got Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox. I mean, all guys that can bring pressure on the outside. We talked about the DBs. Darius Slay, James Bradbury, the corners, probably the best duo in the entire league. So really where they're replacing anybody is, we talked about a little bit at the safety spot, Sidney Brown, the rookie, Terrell Edmonds coming over from the Steelers. They're going to both get a shot along with Reed Blankenship and K'Von Wallace. But the guys that the real question mark that everybody's kind of talking about is Nakobe Dean. He was the darling, the captain of Georgia the year before, didn't get much playing time last year, coming off some surgeries and stuff, trying to put some weight on. But they're saying he's got the green dot this year. Him, and it's looking like right now Nicholas Moreau from the Bears coming over is going to be the two linebackers for them, going along with Hassan Reddick, who's more of a rushing edge player. What do you think about Nakobe Dean? I've got a ton of shares of him in IDP leagues. I actually like him a ton. I think he has a breakout year this year.
I mean, yeah, when he fell to the second round, like he was almost a first-round pick. Like, that's what we were talking about from pre-draft. And then when he fell to the second round, the Eagles didn't take him. I was so pissed. Like, I was genuinely so frustrated. I was really, really angry. And then he fell to the third, and I was like, all right, I'll take it. I mean, the Eagles, I guess they know what they're doing. They got Nakobe Dean in the third. When he didn't go in the second, though, I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Come on. But no, they got him in the third, and it ended up being all right. He was dealing with some injuries last year. Didn't really get much playing time, like you said. But I really do think he's a talented player. He's an elite athlete. He's really, really smart on the football field. And I think that he's going to take the lead role for this linebacker room and really be that guy this year. I'm really hoping for a breakout year as well. Linebackers don't always like start week one and just completely dominate. It's a position that's a little bit harder to learn. It takes a lot of, I mean, because I'm not like the biggest defense guy. I don't play IDP, but it takes a lot to learn the linebacker position. It's a very difficult position to learn and just get in right away and just do. So I think maybe we might see a slow start, but I think eventually we're seeing Nakobe Dean making some big plays for this team.
Yeah, he's my IDP pickup on this team. I really like him. I just think there's nobody behind him with TJ Edwards leaving and Singletary leaving. I mean, everybody they had there, they obviously would not have let all those guys walk if they didn't have confidence in the Nakobe Dean taking over. So I like him. I think he's in just a great spot with all the talent around him. It's not like he's in a position where he has to make every play. He just got to read and do what he needs to do because they're going to get pressure on the quarterback. Hassan Reddick was awesome last year. Brandon Graham is had a great career. And again, if Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter can live up to their expectations, man, that is a monstrous and athletic defensive line. I mean, nobody's going to be able to run on those guys. If those guys are playing right, this team could shut people down big time. And like I said, I love the secondary. Sidney Brown is probably my favorite other guy outside of Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick's a great aspect. If you play IDP, the changes to D end and linebacker this year, where he kind of counts as a D end this year as an edge rusher, is phenomenal. That's going to help him big time. So he's definitely a guy you want to go out and grab. He's a little bit older, but I still think he's got plenty of good years left. And then, like we said, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but Sidney Brown is my rookie DB. I'm taking over anybody else. I think this guy is going to be a beast. I just think Eagles fans are going to absolutely love him. I think he's going to fit in perfectly there in Philadelphia. Let's move on, take a look real quick at the season schedule, kind of see what we think. You know, teams always talking about that hangover, that Super Bowl hangover. When you lose in the Super Bowl, you know, teams really struggle to bounce back and come back that next year. To me, this Eagles team feels like a team that's not going to happen to. This team feels like they are set up. They probably should have won the Super Bowl, to be honest with you. They had that game under control. I feel like this team bounces back and has another good season. What are your thoughts on kind of way things look for them this year?
I mean, when you look down the schedule, I mean, last year when you look at their schedule, it was a cakewalk. I mean, I got to be honest, like, because they started really hot. I believe they were like 8-0, 9-0 at one point. Like, they started really, really hot. And I was looking at the rest of the schedule. I was like, guys, they could legit go undefeated. Like, this is a really easy schedule. I mean, their division wasn't super strong last year. I mean, obviously you had the Giants and the Cowboys going to the playoffs, but those were teams that they could beat. But looking at this year's schedule, obviously you got some tougher teams in there. You got especially the stretch with Dallas, Kansas City, Buffalo, and San Francisco, and then Dallas again. That stretch is going to be brutal. But when you look at the rest of the schedule, it's teams that we can beat. I mean, it's teams that are very beatable, teams that you can beat, especially like the Cardinals, the Rams, the Bucks, teams that are going to fall apart this year. And the Washington Commanders, we have no idea what Sam Howell is going to be. If he falls apart this year, that's going to be easy. And week one with the Patriots, Mac Jones and that offense is not going to do anything to that Eagles defense. They're going to destroy them. So this schedule, I mean, it looks like there is some tougher teams, especially that tough stretch in weeks 9 through 14. That's a really brutal stretch. But other than that, these are some teams that the Eagles are definitely going to be able to compete and beat. I mean, they can compete with anybody in the league. I'm not saying they won't compete in that stretch, but those are going to be some tougher games. But otherwise, looks like a really nice schedule for the Eagles.
Yeah, I like the way it breaks down. Like you said, that the beginning of the season, there's no reason this team can't start 5-0, possibly 6-0 to start out the way. That real tough stretch you said, like in the middle. I think if they can go 500 in that tough stretch with Kansas City, Dallas, Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas again, if they can go 500 in that stretch, coming down the stretch, they got Seattle, Giants, Arizona, Giants again. I think this team, expectations are really high for them right now, just because, what they did last year. Look at the over-unders. Right now it's sitting at 11.5 wins. It's plus 108 for the over. Under is minus 134. So Vegas sees them as an 11-6 team. I kind of, when I was breaking it down, I felt like they were in that range. That felt like a reasonable range for me, was somewhere in that 11-6. Maybe if they can sweep some teams in the division, maybe if they get a sweep of the Giants, they get to more of a 12-5. Right now, for them to win the division, they are at minus 110. Cowboys are plus 175. Giants plus 750. And the Commanders at plus 1,000. Right now, Eagles second best Super Bowl odds at plus 800 right now. So this is a team, obviously, Vegas likes. The schedule's, like you said, more difficult than last year, but it's not a crazy, crazy schedule. The NFC East is going to be tough, so that's going to be interesting to see where they go. But I'm not worried about this team. If this team goes, 10-7, 11-6, and people are like, a little down on them, I think the NFC is wide open. I love their chances in the NFC. Yeah. So for me right now, they're my NFC favorite. I like the Niners a lot, but I like Jalen Hurts a lot more than any quarterback on the 49ers right now. And so for me, I have to lean the edge of the Eagles just because of Jalen Hurts in that matchup. But those are probably my two top teams in the NFC. And I think the third or fourth seed in the NFC is wide open. I mean, absolutely wide open. I think it's going to be really close. A lot of 10-6, a lot of 10-7, a lot of 11-6 teams I have in the NFC this year.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. I mean, the NFC, when you talk about the AFC, you got the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Ravens. You got a ton of like studly teams over there. With the NFC, it's really, really wide open. You have some two top teams. Yeah, I think everyone's top two should be San Francisco and Philly. I don't see any arguments for anyone else. I mean, Dallas, Minnesota. I don't see those guys being up there. I think San Francisco and Philly will finish as a 1 and 2 seed in the NFC, and then the rest is, like you said, wide open. There are so many spots to be taken, especially now with the addition of 1 playoff team, 7 playoff teams per year. I mean, you could absolutely see like there's so many different teams that could get up there in the NFC.
Yeah, it feels like the Niners and the Eagles are just the best all around.
There's not a different level.
Yeah, just loaded defenses and just talent on offense all over the place. It just seems to me, even if they struggle with a tough schedule, I just think it doesn't matter what their final regular season schedule is. I think when the record is whatever, once they get the playoffs, I think those two teams are just going to take over. And I have a hard time realistically putting money on anyone else in this scenario that's not one of those two teams without feeling like I'm absolutely taking a complete flyer and a Hail Mary, because I just feel like those two teams are the teams. And I just feel like the NFC playoffs are going to be way easier to get into. I'm going to put money on Niners-Eagles NFC Championship game before the season starts. I think that's going to be the matchup. I think, I could see the Niners getting them in that regular season game just for the revenge factor, and then coming back with the Eagles against them in the playoffs. So I think this feels like a budding rivalry between the Eagles and the Niners.
Yeah, the rivalry, and because they're just the two clear top dogs in the NFC. There's no other team that's going to really compete with them right now. Those two are like the clear top two. So there's definitely going to be a little bit of a rivalry here when they come back, especially with the Brock Purdy injury in the NFC Championship game last year. There's going to be they're going to want some blood. The 49ers, they're going to want some blood in that regular season game.
So kind of final thoughts here. Give me an idea kind of what you think about just the Eagles, where the organization's going, your final thoughts for this season and kind of your expectations.
I mean, I love where this franchise is going. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, obviously we have some veterans players, especially in the offensive defensive line, that we need to figure out, future with, Jason Kelce, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson. We need to figure out the future with when those guys eventually move on or retire, which should be within the next year or two. Like, we need to figure out the future without those guys. But outside of that, our team, it's really young. There's a lot of great players, a lot of young, really talented players. I mean, that A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, like trio for the next 3, 4, 5 years is just going to be so good. I mean, they're just going to just dominate this offense. And it doesn't really matter who they have at running back, because Jalen Hurts is the RB1 for this team. Jalen Hurts is truly the best rusher on this team right now, I believe. Honestly, I think he could lead the team in rushing yards. I wouldn't be too shocked by it at all. But yeah, that offense for the next few years, those three guys are just going to dominate. And the defense, you have so many young upside players. We talk about all the Georgia players they've drafted. Those guys are elite athletes, guys that can really make a difference. We'll see how they go. And I'm really, really happy with the organization right now with Nick Sirianni head coach. It's beautiful. It's great. Nick Sirianni's an amazing head coach. He gets the best out of his players. And Howie Roseman is GM, running the draft boards really well over the past couple of years. The Eagles' future is really, really bright. And I think Jalen Hurts has not scratched the surface of what he could be. I don't think he has. I think this dude could legit be a 4,000-yard passer if he really, really develops. I really think Jalen Hurts could get up there in terms of passing yards. I mean, obviously, he's a running quarterback, so getting to 4,000 would be tough for him, and because he doesn't pass that often. But I think he's got the talent where he could get there. And all the camp reports have shown that he's taking a step forward. He actually is. So all the camp reports have shown this guy is taking a step forward this year. He's looking a lot better than he has in years past. I'm excited for Jalen Hurts this year. I think this is a year where he could actually take a step forward rather than a step back in terms of being a passer.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think they're going to open things up a little bit. I think last year they're being a little cautious. They didn't want anything crazy to happen. They're kind of really working him into the offense. I actually think, I think he could definitely throw. I mean, the guy threw a ton in college, so it's not like he was a pure runner in college at Alabama or Oklahoma. I mean, he put up ridiculous stats at both places. So I definitely think the sky's the limit for him. I think this is a great situation. I think the Eagles, just the fact that he's on a good team, good organization. I love the fact that they locked him up this offseason with a new
so great. Yeah.
I just think, avoiding everything they saw with the Lamar Jackson situation in Baltimore, I thought they were super smart at getting in there, getting a deal done before it even became a question, before anyone could start going, oh, so when are you guys going to start talking? Oh, when is this going to come up? I just thought it was a really smart move organizationally to just knock that out right away, keep all that pressure off them, and then let those guys come in. Because I think people highly underestimate, those players answering those types of questions day in and day out in the locker room. It just wears on you. If you're going to hear, are they going to re-sign Jalen? What's going to happen? And, what's the long-term future if he isn't the QB here? They don't have to listen to any of those questions. Those things are gone. Nope. Jalen's our guy. He's here forever. And I think that's an underrated thing in professional sports, just being someone who covered teams, covered the NFL in locker rooms. Those guys just get tired of answering those types of questions. And I think the less they have to talk about that kind of stuff and the more they can talk about the actual game and how they're playing and how the team's playing, I think that's the kind of stuff that keeps the locker room together and it makes them take that next step. So that's a big reason for me. Outside of the talent, I just think it feels like everything's going in that right direction for the Eagles. And for me, it's kind of crazy. I don't have any connection to Philadelphia. Never was anything. I loved Randall Cunningham growing up. I have a Randall Cunningham signed helmet in my basement.
Yeah,
I've been eyeing that Kelly Green Mitch and Ness number 12 jersey that keeps popping up in my email. I'm just waiting to pull the trigger. Randall Cunningham's one of my all-time favorite players. I love playing with them on the old Tecmo Super Bowl game on the old Super Nintendo. Is just absolutely one of my favorite things ever. And Hurts last year just gave me those flashbacks of Randall Cunningham just running all over the field and just making the throws and just kind of make it just exciting, maybe kind of root for the Eagles, even though I'm not necessarily a Eagles guy. I think they're a fun team to watch. And I think they're a team that breaks that Super Bowl hangover curse this year. I think they come back ready to play. And I think they feel like they were the best team. They should have won, and they're going to try to prove it this year. So I've got my money on the Eagles. I just think that this team is going in the right direction, and it feels like they've got years of this. So hopefully that's the case as well, as everything keeps going well and nothing happens with their guys. Because, like you said, ton of young talent on offense and defense, and right now some pretty good contracts. So this team feels like it should be hanging around for quite a few years.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think the big question for the Eagles this year is, can they unlock the passing game at a different level? Because if they can get, Jalen Hurts, overall, he was really, really good as a passer. Last year, he took that step, but he only threw 3,700 yards overall. They were about 20th in pass attempts this past season. If the Eagles can get to the point where they're like 15th or like 12th to 15th in pass attempts, like above average team in pass attempts, and Jalen Hurts can get towards that 4,000 yard range, that's just going to completely change the game. That's going to completely change everything for the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's going to be quite incredible for the Philadelphia Eagles if Jalen Hurts can get to that range, and they will totally take the next step and be able to beat some of those big time AFC teams like the Bills, the Chiefs, and those kind of teams in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Hutch, thanks for joining me on this. Is fantastic having you on the show. Everything was great. I appreciate it. Can you just tell everybody where they can find you, all the stuff that you got going on? Because I know you've got a ton of things going on in the fantasy community. Let everyone know where they can get a hold of you and where they can find you.
So yeah, thank you, man. You guys can go follow me on Twitter. I'm at HutchinsonB_FF. It says on my little StreamYard name right there. You can follow me on Twitter there. I do work with football guys on their YouTube channel. I'm going to be appearing there more soon. I write articles with DLF from time to time, and I have Hooked on Fantasy, my podcast with Luke Sawhook. We've been working on that for the past couple weeks, but it's going really well so far. So I appreciate it if you were to check that out wherever you get your podcast. And if you're available Monday nights, we live stream them on Twitter Monday nights. So absolutely check that out. And I have a Patreon, patreon.com/clutchhutch if you're interested in that. And yeah, that's pretty much all I do. I mean, I'm really just a teenager trying to make his way in the fantasy football space. I've been doing this kind of content for about 2.5 years now. I mean, yeah, I joined in February. Like I started tweeting in February of 2021. So yeah, about 2.5 years.
It's been, this is awesome.
Quite a great journey.
I'm pumped to see kids like you getting into this thing early. That's one of those things I talk about with people. I'm old school journalist. I was a newspaper writer, radio, everything else. Did all that old school stuff before I got into doing fantasy. Just here in the last year or two. Man, that's the one thing. If I could have go back and tell myself in college, I've been like, get in the fantasy space. I know it doesn't seem like it's going to be, worth any money or going to do anything, but I would have loved to get back in when I was in my college days. And I think that's just awesome to see kids like you getting in, hitting it hard, and just out there doing stuff, man. Because there's a lot of room to grow in this space, and the earlier you can get into it and make connections, I think the better. And I think you're doing an awesome job of it. You're a great follow. I'll follow you on Twitter all the time. So I'll be checking out your show definitely on Monday nights as well. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. It was a fun show talking Eagles. Yeah.
You can check us out at The Stew with JT Brew, JT Brew Stew on Twitter. You can follow me at JT Orange on Twitter. You can check out all our fantasy content, everything on DynastyProsFootball.com. Check out our YouTube channel, which has this show plus past shows. Go through all the different teams I've gone over with different guests throughout the year. And check my stuff out on DLF. I always have to remember my people tell that. I IDP ranker there, so articles coming out on there all the time. Also, Monday nights for us. Every other Monday, we do a Devy show here, the Dynasty Pros Devy show. So make sure to check that out as well. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. May all your draft picks hit and the trading never quit. See you next time.
You up on trades and why you move? You ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points, makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release.